So tell me, what evidence was strong enough in the Idaho 4 case to secure the arrest warrant of Brian Koberger without the DNA? I'm ARHayes. This is Convict's Thoughts, and let me tell you, as much as I always am looking and studying other cases, because I love to talk true crime. I like to look at all the different cases out there, and I want to bring you great content in many different realms of true crime. But our mind always comes back to the Idaho 4. Of course, the loss of Xana, Kaylee, Maddie, and Ethan is the whole main reason why we're all here. You know, the true crime communities are growing because our hearts are all beating for those out there that are being hurt, or loss of lives, or children being hurt, or there's so many different cases out there for all of us to pay attention to. But my mind just keeps coming back to this one because I don't make sense of so much within this case. And I'm not the only one. There's so many that just don't. They don't grasp it. They don't understand. And why is that? Why is that? You have a whole community of people that have found this individual guilty, and all they want to do is poke the finger at all of us, saying that we're crazy, we're nut jobs, we're conspiracy theorists. And maybe I am. Maybe I am, because I sat around with them for so long in my lifetime behind bars. I heard the stories, and I heard what the crimes were all about, and the reasons behind them, and the motives, and how they happened, and how they were investigated. I heard it all. And, you know, when they weren't talking about it, I was reading their paperwork. For those of you that don't know, many high-profile inmates that are incarcerated, including myself, would have property boxes filled to the gills of paperwork from our cases. Everything from evidence to all the different documents that were filed throughout the case. Discoverable evidence that would be turned over from the prosecution that didn't get used in the trial. So we even got to see more than what was legitimately let out to the public. So me, always being one that dove into the actual wording of things and the evidence and the way they were investigated, the way they were interrogated, I just had this mind that, well, let's just say at one point early in life, I wanted to be a lawyer. Sometimes I still think that I want to go that route, not so much anymore for, you know, the glamour that I used to think of it as a kid. I mean, we used to watch the movies and we thought it was really cool when the suited lawyer would get up and defend his client and would pound his fist on the desk when the prosecution was not proving their case and their client was innocent. I watched all that, and I had a keen sense of it was more than that. It had to make sense. Most crimes that are committed, as they start portraying themselves and they get solved, they make sense. You can see it. It flows. The evidence adds up. The statements made add up. The interrogation room video shows a portrayal of somebody breaking within the interrogation room. You see the court process play itself out smoothly with discoverable evidence being made discoverable for the defense, and the judge's rulings making it seem as though everything is on the up and up throughout the case. Not everything is sealed and redacted, but you're actually feeling the flow of the case, and you're hearing from people, and the evidence is made clear for all to see and understand. So the puzzle pieces start to fit, meaning that you could see how this person would have been the one to commit the crime and the reason why they did it. But when I come to the Idaho 4, and even as we move through all the oddities before the actual arrest, which there were so many within just that, and that didn't even portray a defendant or a suspect at that point. That was just all the oddities that were rolling around in the little town where the crime was committed, between law enforcement, college kids, and just the rumblings of what was going on. I mean, even the law enforcement didn't seem as though they could get on the same page to get information out to the local community to ensure them that they were going to be safe. Then you watch the victims' families, one in particular, that in front of the camera had a different spin on things every time they spoke. The one that committed this crime never needed to go upstairs. The wounds were different. They were very, very different. And then you watch the coroner speak upon the actual case itself when she arrives at the scene hours upon hours later. And you could just see the oddity in everything that she said. It was almost like, I almost felt like it wasn't even real. Like she wasn't supposed to be the one that was actually at the crime scene. She was just the one that the law enforcement put in front of the camera to make the statement, not knowing what was actually done at the scene. I mean, anybody that says the toxicology reports wouldn't have any meaning within the time or the manner of death, that makes no sense. It makes no sense. We didn't all care to know how drunk they were, what they had in their system, why they had it in their system. What we cared about was how was that going to help us determine a time of death. And that's key. A time of death is very key. Why? Because that builds a timeline which we all watched change. And I still feel today that one of the victims' families is completely set on a totally different timeline than what's being portrayed now by everybody else. They're set on a whole different timeline. They even call it their dark time, their dark hour. So what is it that is just rattling in my brain that I just don't get, when a prosecution can say they don't even need the knife sheath and the DNA and the way that they got all that, because that's not how they secured the arrest warrant anyway. That has nothing to do with this case anymore, because now they actually have the swab from the defendant's mouth which matches up to said sheath. So you shouldn't have to show the evidence in regards to everything you did with the knife sheath from the time you found it till this defendant was arrested, evidently. You claim none of that matters whatsoever, and it did not help you secure an arrest warrant. Yet in my mind, I'm thinking you didn't have an arrest warrant prior to this defendant being all the way out in Pennsylvania and you doing some weird stakeout off camera that gathers trash out of a neighbor's garbage can based off of the knife sheath DNA being utilized by the FBI to do this whole IgG building of a tree to narrow it down to... So how is it not a part of what was used to get the arrest warrant? What am I missing? You didn't use the swab of the mouth DNA to get the arrest warrant. So let's talk about it for 1 second so I can get my thoughts out there and you can comment to help guide me in what secured an arrest warrant on December 30th when the crime was committed on November 13th of 2022. So we're talking a month and a half later, after someone's driven all the way across the country, being pulled over 2 times in the state for very odd reasons. Odd reasons. I've been pulled over for everything. I've never been pulled over on a highway for following too closely and twice in a 5-minute period of time. Anybody that says that's normal is ridiculous. But why wouldn't you have had an arrest warrant prior to that little cruise across the United States if the IgG DNA usage wasn't in play? Did you miraculously come up with some amazing evidence that's not documented in your PCA arrest affidavit? I know you did not secure an arrest warrant based off of cell phone pings, because in your own very affidavit, you showed proof that they're unreliable. You discussed a cell phone ping showing him near the scene or at the scene in Moscow, Idaho, and then clearly make this statement that was incorrect and he was not there. So you've nullified cell phone pings as being credible. Nullified it. If a juror does not nullify the cell phone pings when you've already proven them, in this case alone, not even talking about previous cases, we're talking about today's cases, you've proven it to where there is reasonable doubt within it. So let's set those aside. I don't care if you have 12 cell phone pings of Brian Koberger driving around Moscow, Idaho. I don't care. That means nothing to me. Set aside. He turns off his said cell phone at a certain time and turns it back on an hour and a half later, and you've deemed the crimes happened sometime in that time frame that phone was off. Okay. I didn't know it was illegal to turn your cell phone off. I didn't know there was a standard of time if I did turn my cell phone off, how long it had to either be off for, or that I would later have to try to explain in a public forum in front of everybody to the courts, rather than just them being able to see on my phone. And my phone went off during a certain time. Does my phone need an alibi? I don't know if people really realize when you use a cigarette lighter in your car and you use the USB port to charge your said cell phone. Did you know it charges faster if your phone is off than if it's on? So if your phone is down at 3, 5, 6%, which I don't know if you let your phones get to that point or not, but I do. My phone right now is at 18%. My phone is typically drained because I'm on it all day using it for something, or watching a video, or doing something with it. So my phone gets drained. When I get into my car and I plug it into my cigarette lighter, I shut my phone down to charge my phone faster. And I'm not a genius. I don't even know how I knew that would work, other than somebody else, my wife, showed me that. So now I do it. Maybe his phone had died. Maybe he had been out all night and hadn't had a chance to charge his phone at home. It was a Saturday and a Saturday night. Maybe he was out doing something. It's already being kind of clearly shown by the defense that he most likely was not home for the majority of Saturday night, before we even get into the time frame of the said crime. Can any one of us say that his phone was not low on power? I would have to set that aside. It's probably not a piece of evidence that could go in front of a judge to get an arrest warrant. The route of driving doesn't prove much unless you got actual footage of him going into the home. I don't care if you park 20 spaces away from the home. If you can't prove that I walked towards and into that home, it's not worthy of an arrest warrant. Did you know, ladies and gentlemen, that you were allowed to drive and park your car in all public areas as long as it's a proper place for a car to be parked and roads to be driven on? There's not a law that states if you live in Pullman, Washington, that you cannot drive in Moscow, Idaho at a certain time of the day. There's nothing off limits about that. There's no public law that states I can't park in a public parking space. There's no off-limit places for me, especially if I don't have a restraining order, if I've never had an issue, if I've never been arrested in the area, I don't have a warrant, I do have a driver's license. I don't see any issues of why I can't take a spin in my car and go wherever the heck I want to go. I know it's circumstantial evidence, everybody. I get it. I get pounded every day by circumstantial. We have so much circumstantial, it just piles up and piles up. And okay, well, I'm setting aside the fact that I was driving my car around. He got me on a couple of cameras until you could show me some proof beyond me driving around on said cameras. I don't see an arrest warrant coming from that, ladies and gentlemen, and if there is one, we're getting weak warrants for people based on very little evidence. So what else do we have? What else does the affidavit have? Oh yeah, we do have an eyewitness that saw some bushy eyebrows, some black clothing, a mask over the face, leaving out the rear door after she heard numerous things in the home being said, done, dogs playing. She didn't make mention of the loud thud of a body or a dog barking like they state in the PCA, because that came from an outside camera that seemed to have heard more than she did. But she did give a statement, an eyewitness statement, that didn't really identify much. Didn't identify much. So we know that that wasn't what was used to get the arrest warrant, because if that was what was used to get the arrest warrant, that means the eyewitness clearly stated it was Brian Kohlberger, and they would have drove over to his apartment, or they would have gone to his work in Washington State, they would have cuffed him, they would have read his rights, and they would have dropped his butt into an interrogation room under arrest for murder. Been around the block. I've been through this. They're not going to let him run around. When there's an eyewitness that puts you at the scene and they can point right at you and say, there he is. That's him. Right there. Got him. You go to an interrogation room, then you go to jail. That's not what they got the arrest warrant on. Okay, it goes into the circumstantial evidence. However, let's think about this, ladies and gentlemen. If anybody, including myself, including another criminal, were to break into a home, don't you think we would most likely be wearing dark-colored clothing, a mask, our head covered? Who knows if we'd have bushy eyebrows or not, but I would say probably many do, or maybe the lighting's not good and you think somebody does. And you walk out of the house. I don't know. But coming back to the knife sheath real quick, because now I'm just kind of pondering even more about the oddities. So remember, this is more parts of the oddities that we've been talking about in the Idaho 4 case. So it's going correlated with more. We're just now kind of into the area of the arrest and what was utilized for that. But the sheath. When the original law enforcement, I'm not talking about people that could potentially have been in the home prior to law enforcement getting called 911 and getting to the scene. When law enforcement starts looking at the scene to determine, oh man, we got a horrifically bad crime here. Did they not take a walk quickly through the home to ensure there was nobody else in the home, or maybe even someone still breathing or alive? Meaning, they most likely, they see Ethan, they see Zana on the second floor. Did they not venture up to the third floor to check said bedrooms upstairs immediately? Meaning they would have walked in where it said Kaylee and Maddie were located. Did they not step near those bodies to ensure they were not breathing or fighting for their lives? Because if they made that step, which I would feel as though as law enforcement you would want to make that step, because you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to save a life, and it's possible maybe someone's alive, unless you could just visually tell within that room. Well, I don't think you can visually tell. I just don't. I think you have to check. So if you're standing over the top of these two young ladies, you didn't see the sheath, that just has to be wait and found 4 hours later, right? You didn't see it right there? Because if you were the first one to see that sheath was seen by you securing the actual scene and ensuring these two young ladies had actually passed, where is your report of you finding said sheath, evidence of this crime? Because I see a report written by Blaker and by Payne, who state that they see the sheath from the doorway. So did they find the sheath? Meaning the original officer who most likely secured the scene and checked on said victims did not see it, because he should have a report. There should be a complete report by every officer that secured that scene of exactly everything they saw and endured when they entered the premises. Because if you don't have that, now you're making it seem as though Payne and Blaker are the first ones within the scene. That's what we're getting out of the probable cause. These are the two that are writing the probable cause affidavit in regards to that crime scene and the way things transpired evidence-wise. Where is the reference to the actual people that found said evidence? Where is the actual statements by the officers that arrived first and made it to the second floor to find the first bodies, now making it known that they have a full-blown crime scene, getting others to come? Because remember, Payne doesn't even get to the crime scene till 4 or 5 hours after the fact. What was happening in those 4 or 5 hours? Where is it documented within the probable cause of how they secured the crime scene? I know, people say, well, that doesn't have to be in the probable cause. It doesn't have to be. I would think, based off of every probable cause that I've seen, you make statements within that of which officers found your victims and which officers secured your surviving roommates and which officers saw the original chaos and deaths and why it all led to all of this. I mean, they talk about that who was at a local bar. They talk about, you know, the car driving around, what the fraternity was doing. There's so much in here about everything that happened, opening the door, blah, 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 blah. Where's the actual documented information that can be backed up later? They can even make the statement in their probable cause that evidence will be provided at a later time to corroborate both audio and video, to corroborate everything necessary in regards to this crime scene. And this is going to be a part of why this individual and suspect is under arrest. Ladies and gentlemen, in an arrest warrant, to obtain that, you have to have probable cause to arrest somebody. That's what a PCA is for. Now, when you get caught red-handed, the PCA is so easy. They just legitimately give a couple of sentences and then state you were arrested based off of being caught red-handed. But when it comes into an investigation, the probable cause is key, because this is what you're going before a judge to get them to sign off in agreement that you're not just maliciously going to pick just anybody up off the street, ruining a college kid's life by taking him out of college and putting him under arrest for quadruple murder. Because this is going to be all over everything, that this suspect's name is now going to be plastered everywhere as the man that committed a quadruple homicide. So when you go before that judge, and I hope Idaho's like places I've been, and I hope that the original judge took it serious enough that when these officers and detectives are presenting their probable cause for the arrest, there is more than what's in this actual probable cause. But if you don't mind me asking, if you did not use the DNA from the knife sheath and the IgG to narrow down the search to this suspect. Why is the sheath in the PCA? Why does it need to be here? Why does it need to be here? You're not using it. It's not what you got your arrest warrant upon. Now, also in this PCA, not one word of ever contacting Bryan Kohberger prior to the arrest. If you really realize how a lot of investigations happen, think about that interrogation room where you watch the video of the interrogation and they bring somebody in to talk to them and they start feeling them out. They start driving that wedge in to try to get the info. It's every high-profile case. I love watching them. I think they're the coolest thing. I don't know why I think they're cool, but I do. I like watching them. It's like a criminal mastermind that thinks he's gotten away with everything in the world against a detective that thinks he's going to break them. It's a back and forth, and it could be hours, it could be days, it could be interview after interview. Don't tell me that you guys don't find it interesting to watch the Israel Keys interrogations back and forth. The Jodi Arias clownship interrogations. All these different interrogations. And we don't get any of it with Bryan Kohberger. Now, I remember discussing a lot of things that caught me off guard in regards to posts that were being made. We had the Papa Rogers situation on Facebook, and we had the 4chan blowing up with fraternity stuff, talking about the fraternity and how they could see from the frat house directly into windows. And, you know, I've had many of people supply those to me over time. I've actually never been on 4chan. I've never been on Reddit. I don't venture that direction, but people have furnished them to me, so I figured I'd read over them and I would see that stuff. And you know, it's really crazy because within the Papa Rogers information, you could tell immediately, well, maybe not everybody, because many believe that's Bryan Kohberger. To this day, they still think that was Bryan Kohberger that was doing that. That was not Bryan Kohberger, ladies and gentlemen. I interacted with Papa Rogers a couple of times back and forth because I was picking at some of the things they were saying, and we even got into discussions a couple of times in private chat that became a little bit heated where I was calling him out, calling him law enforcement and a snitch. Those are my two thoughts of what he was. He was law enforcement or he was snitch. And then it actually turned out it wasn't even really a him. It was not Bryan Kohberger that was being Papa Rogers. Then you had Josco, 1972, coming on, doing all the stuff on YouTube and Twitter, and I don't even remember what they were. Different video, TikTok, not Twitter, I'm sorry, TikTok. Wouldn't show his face, but reading paperwork and talking about the case and all these inside people feeding him information and clueless. But maybe law enforcement was giving him a little bit of information to pump out there for all to start pushing someone to turn themselves in or give up information like an informant would. I'm sure that tip line was blowing up with stuff like that. But the one thing that really caught me as I'm reading it was when someone made the statement, I'm hiding in the Poconos in Pennsylvania or something of that nature. Giving up the exact location of Brian Kohberger. And I think about all the stupid criminals I've been around, because, I mean, when you do an amount of time that I've done, you literally have criminals that tell on themselves all day long in a stupid manner, trying to play a game, and, you know, you read their paperwork and you just start cracking up wanting to beat the daylights out of them because you're afraid they're going to be the next snitch that's going to tell on you because they're too stupid to create a better story or one that keeps silence and then get away with something. So people think that Brian Kohberger, who wants to get away with the perfect murder, that's what they claim, he wants to get away with the perfect crime. The best way to do that, to get away with the perfect crime, or play games, is tell people where you are, where they can find you. Why would he say, come to my home in Pennsylvania, when he could send them anywhere in the country if that was the intent to play a mind game? Why straight to you? Why not actually play the game and make them solve the puzzle? Because it's bogus. That was 100% law enforcement putting it out there for the social community to grab onto it and run with it. What did we do? We built all these scenarios out of it, and look. Now, at this point, because Brian Kohberger's been arrested, people are now using that against him, saying he was the person that put that information out there. I wasn't the smartest criminal in the world. Not by any means. I got caught numerous times. On top of it, I got told on a lot. But I always was an actual person that was right in the thick of what was happening in the crime. So they were always going to have evidence against me. More so than just circumstantial. It was just a matter of if they could put it together enough to reel me into the mix with some of the other people they were bringing in. What, in this case, secured an arrest warrant 6 weeks after the crime that could not have been utilized earlier to get the arrest without having to dig in garbage cans in Pennsylvania? The whole Pennsylvania thing happened within days of the arrest. 1 week, it wasn't a long drawn out thing. That took days. So if it wasn't all of that that led to the arrest, what was it? What was it that got you the ability to take a swab of somebody's DNA via a court order to compare to the DNA on the sheath without the IgG and everything being built to lead to Kohberger? That's what, if I, either being a defendant or counsel for a defendant, I want to know exactly what secured the arrest warrant. I'm looking at this PCA. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what secured the arrest warrant. This is what secured it. I see cell phone pings with the contradictory that one of them's not true. I see a statement by a surviving witness that gives no declaration that this suspect or defendant is exactly who she saw. I see nothing from the other surviving witness other than that she was interviewed and they took her phone and her digital information to review. I see timelines of where and who was where and when and why. I see a DoorDash, which has been stated to be a nothing burger. I see a route that they've put together of camera footage of a white car driving around, yet not a single thing that actually determines that it is this suspect's car, or determines he was the person in the car that got out of the car at the crime scene. But they haven't even clarified here he was the one in the car. I mean, I read through all of this, just like all of you. I've torn this apart. And I cannot at all come to any conclusion that leads me to believe that an arrest warrant could be properly secured without them using the DNA. It's not possible. It's not possible. Now, if you told me you had him in for an interrogation weeks prior to the arrest, and he gave you information during that said interrogation that you need to go investigate, and you came up with some other stuff, then I would probably believe you, as long as it was on audio or video camera, and it was in the PCA. But it's not. You have this long, drawn-out PCA with even pictures in it of cell phone pings. Where's a picture of the damn car? Where's a picture in this PCA of the defendant driving the car? Where's there anything? I mean, and then I watch as the warrants are being secured for all the search warrants. They hadn't been in his apartment yet, so they hadn't got any evidence out of that. They had not been in his work. They hadn't got any evidence out of that. They had zero evidence out of his car because they hadn't been in his car yet. They hadn't been in his parents' house yet. I see nothing about them actually surveilling him in Washington. I see nothing in this PCA that comes back with it. Instead of having the cell phone pings, why is there no statement in this PCA that he, the suspect, had been engaging with them on social media in some way? Not a word of it in here. The only reason why this PCA led to a signature by a judge to get the arrest warrant is because it states right in here they found a sheath with DNA on it. And you know as well as I do, they had to tie that to this suspect, and the only way to get that cheek swab was to have an arrest. And when you're arrested, it's determined that the courts can issue for a cheek swab or a blood draw, or there's numerous different things that they can force you to do once you've been arrested. And that's how they got the match of their DNA, was because they got an arrest warrant off of nothing. This PCA is nothing. It's garbage. And I'm not even the most intelligent person. And I know. There's people out there that are going to come back at me and they're going to say, but this is full of all the information. Well, then answer my simple questions. Who secured the scene? Who was the first one in Maddie and Kaylee's bedroom where they lost their lives and did not see the sheet? And if they did, why is there no report? Why is there no picture of the white car in the PCA determining it to be the exact year of the car that Brian Koberger drives? Not the wrong years, the one he drives. Why is there not even a picture of him getting out of the car at the crime scene? You have pictures of cell phone pings in your PCA and a route that was driven. Show me some still photos of the white car along this route with documented timestamps of what time that same car at all these different places making this route, and all those pictures. You can put that into the PCA. You can at least put one picture in there. One still photo. It'd be nice even if the PCA, if you could go in there and actually write a documented summary of why you changed the time of the crime. Why did you change the time frame? Why didn't you explain what led you to change the time frame? Why did you no longer believe it was at a certain time and now it's a totally different time? Why can't you explain that? Why can't they just be honest in court right now and say, look, we messed up, we rushed this investigation, we utilized a technique that is not on the up and up. We were trying to solve a crime that 4 young individuals lost their lives, and we wanted their families to get justice, so we rushed an investigation and we possibly made mistakes, and that's why we're having a hard time making evidence discoverable to the defense, because 1, either we just don't have it, or 2, we know it's going to conflict the story and it's going to cause us an issue in prosecuting this case, which is going to put a big negative light on the whole community, which doesn't deserve that based off of our own errors. And this is in the national spotlight with every social media and YouTube creator talking about it. We can only imagine the negativity that's going to stir from this. This suspect's lawyer should be breaking the tables in front of them to get this information. They should be breaking the tables in front of them to find out why our court system is going to allow this to happen. And I already know the answer. They're going to allow it to go through the state realms of things, because guess what? At the very tail end of it, they know they can rely on the Supreme Courts to overhear everything. And if an appeal is made and it's worthy of an appeal and the appeal is awarded, it's going to look at the Supreme Court's going to take the full view of that, not the court in Moscow, Idaho, because they convicted him. It would be on the Supreme Court for letting the community and the country down by quadruple murderer walking the streets. When at the end of the day, why don't they just say, we might have got this wrong, ladies and gentlemen. We need to get back to investigating and see if we could figure this out the right way. Maybe we still have the right person, but we need to do our due diligence. We need more time. So it's best if we restart this process. Taking up a lot of your time. I'm glad that you shared and allowed me to get some of these thoughts up of my mind. And next, you know, I'm going to break it here because I want to give you some time to think about it, digest it. Feed me your comments. Give me your feelings. Give me your thoughts. Next, I want to talk about the prelim compared to the grand jury and why I feel as though in the Idaho 4, that played out the way it did. I appreciate you being here with me. I'm ARHayes. It's Convict's Thoughts. See you again soon. Don't forget, hit the like button for me. Subscribe if you haven't, and let's have more great discussions. Have a great night, everybody.